All right, first things first, and something you have explained on KubeFM before. Who are you? What's your role, and where do you work?
My name's Alex Chircop. I'm a chief architect in Akamai's cloud. And I also have a second hat. I'm a member of the TOC at the CNCF.
Now, what are three Kubernetes emerging tools that you are keeping an eye on?
So it's interesting. I'm looking at some of the evolution in Kubernetes and looking at, how we take more sophisticated workloads on. So one of the things I'm very keen on recently is using Kubernetes as a control plane, using projects like KCP, for example, where we try and figure out how to scale the control plane to massive orchestration numbers, which are challenging otherwise. But effectively taking the benefits of all of the use cases and patterns we've learned with cloud native and applying them to other systems too. And then the other thing that's a continual challenge and something that keep track of is things like observability with projects like OpenTelemetry, where at scale we constantly have these challenges of being able to scale and keeping as much data as possible to make the telemetry useful, but on the other hand, keeping the costs under control. And then finally, I'm very interested in some of the more sophisticated access control system and policy enforcements that we're getting in Kubernetes. So we obviously have had CEL and OPA for quite a while, but other projects now are joining are looking to join the CNCF, including things like OpenFGA and CEDAR, which are sort of again exciting and kind of adding more sophisticated access control mechanisms to Kubernetes.
Now, one of our podcast guests, Mac, believes that the designers of Kubernetes didn't set out to build an overcomplicated piece of software. Rather, it grew organically with hard-won knowledge baked into the code base. How do you view the complexity versus capability trade-off in Kubernetes?
It'll be no surprise to say that I think Kubernetes at this point is fairly ubiquitous, and the cloud native ecosystem is more or less adopted everywhere. But still, Kubernetes is kind of still a building block. I don't see Kubernetes as the only thing that the developer needs. There are multiple layers in that stack. And so what we kind of see is that Kubernetes more and more is now being built into internal developer platforms and internal platforms that provide additional abstractions and built-in layers to manage the Kubernetes environment. And you start off with how you manage Kubernetes deployments and the general operations of Kubernetes, but then you often think about how you layer on things like certificate management and ingress and say user management and access controls and secrets management, for example. And of course, at the end of the day, it is all about the developers and it's all about making the applications real. So, you also need that additional layer to include the development and application workflow, like CI/CD and the availability of repos and container registries and that sort of thing. And then, of course, once the applications have been deployed and they're running on your platform, you need to look at, the operational aspects, like how do you do observability, and how do you do scaling, and how do you do failover. And so I kind of see Kubernetes as like the kernel of these platforms. And then you have like application and developer platforms that are layered on top of Kubernetes. And that is now what's sort of enabling a lot of the automation and fast time to markets for application developers to get their products out quicker.
And another guest of ours, John McBride, expressed that Kubernetes is the platform of the future for AI and machine learning, particularly for scaling GPU compute. Do you agree with this assessment? And what challenges do you see in running AI workloads on Kubernetes?
AI workloads are inherently distributed and need orchestration, over sometimes tens of nodes, often dozens or hundreds or thousands of nodes. And I think this was captured in a KubeCon keynote a few years ago. And I'm going to continue saying it because I love it's a little cliche, but I love the sentiment, which is, if AI is the new killer app, then Kubernetes is the new web server. Kubernetes is the natural home for running AI applications. And that's because Kubernetes is inherently extensible and already supports a lot of the distributed nature that AI applications need, whether it's, training and models and ingesting data to, having, pools of GPUs for inferencing and RAG pipelines and that sort of thing. And there have been a bunch of, and it's exciting to me because there have been so many developments here. Most recently we've had DRA, which is dynamic resource allocation, which allows applications to share and make use of a pool of GPUs and have their workloads scheduled across a pool of GPUs in a much more efficient and hardware agnostic way. We also have a lot of new schedulers which have been built and contributed to the CNCF, which allow the scheduling of those GPU workloads both at scale, but also optimized using various scaling strategies. And then there's obviously all of the hardware support and GPU support, where we're seeing models using, for example, the OCI formats to be deployed. So we're getting models effectively being containerized as a primary deployment mechanism. And finally, we have lots of extensions like K-Agent and various Envoy API enhancements, etc., which effectively turn Kubernetes into an AI API gateway for all of the applications that are now sitting and being orchestrated on Kubernetes. So I think Kubernetes is the perfect host for those AI applications. And this kind of ties also back to how you think about developer platforms. So if your developer platforms have been built on top of Kubernetes, then it kind of makes sense for developers to build their AI functionality on those Kubernetes developer platforms too.
So thinking about Kubernetes, both when we think about platform and also thinking about AI, Kubernetes turned 10 years old last year. What do you expect to happen in the next 10 years? What would you like to see happen in the next 10 years?
That is an interesting question. And it's something we also sort of, ponder about in the CNCF quite a bit. One of the things that I think we're seeing is the evolution of the landscape. There are a lot of components in the cloud native ecosystem, including Kubernetes, that have gotten to, a reasonable level of maturity. And what this means is that we're now getting to a point where for some of these projects, it's no longer about, growth at all costs. And it's about, consolidating options and consolidating, features that are more production specific. But also it means that we have to turn some of our focus to how we sustain the projects and how we keep the projects healthy and how we maintain the projects when perhaps, the hype has moved on to the next thing. So we've built this foundation and now the important thing over the next 10 years is how do we sustain it and how do we continue to use it.
What's next for you, Alex?
So I'm very busy working with Akamai's cloud, building some of these application platforms on Kubernetes and building our cloud platforms and control plane platforms on these cloud native technologies. So as always, I'll be super embedded in the ecosystem and continue to work with so many of the people in the community, and which is always so vibrant and so exciting.
And what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
The best way to get in touch with me is on the CNCF Slack, where I'm typically always available, and don't guarantee to respond immediately because there's quite a lot of pings, but that's the easiest way.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Alex. Looking forward to speaking to you soon. Take care.
Very welcome. It's been great as always.